All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Ryan Liu for Baruah Podcast episode number 50. How we doing?
Good, I'm good.
So it's been a long ride, long journey to get here, and I do think I have to induct Ryan Liu into the Baruah Hall of Fame because this is his fifth appearance here. So we're just gonna kick it back, have a nice conversation for episode 50.
I appreciate that. It's an honor to be here.
So just a couple days ago, we were up in South Mountain Reservation, going on a hike, beautiful hike. A little walk through nature, not too difficult as our first hike, which was up in Delaware Water Gap. But an incredible day. How'd you feel about that day?
It's pretty chill. Nice 6 miles, I think, right? Pretty scenic. We had a pretty good dinner after. Yeah, nothing crazy. It was a pretty peaceful hike.
Yeah, I always feel good when we get to go out in nature. I've been trying to do more of that in the recent years, just trying to get out, even if it's like easy hikes, going to a park or something. I just feel that when I spend so much time inside all day, whether it be behind a computer screen or just, I don't know, behind a book or even just with people, when I'm inside all day, I start to get more restless. But when I get to go out, go on a hike like that, it always feels incredible. And I just want to keep integrating as much as that I can into my life.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's like partly just being outside in nature. You get like the sunlight and stuff, and um, yeah, it's just better than being inside on the screen all day. You feel more energized.
When you reflect back on your early childhood and even times later on during COVID and during high school, would you say that you was nature a part of your life at all, or getting outside, or did that grow maybe more later in your life?
Nah, I think it was a big part of my life as a kid. Like I was always outside, playing soccer and stuff with my friends. Um, I used to do Boy Scouts a lot, so a lot of camping, a lot of hiking. Honestly, like I think it's faded a lot, like the outdoor spirit inside of me. But yeah, I'm trying to go out when I can these days. You know.
When you say it's faded, do you mean it's the love of it is kind of going away, like you don't enjoy it as much, or is it more that other obligations come up and it kind of gets deprioritized in a way?
Um, Definitely the second one. Just having so much work to do and um, schoolwork, personal stuff. You just don't have that many opportunities to go outside. Yeah, but I still love it a lot. Of course, hiking's really fun.
What do you think it's going to look like for you when you go to Rutgers this fall and the school year, throughout the school year? Do you think it's going to be something to think about at all, or how's it going to play out with all the? And also, in addition to that, what are the things you're going to be doing with your time more at Rutgers? I think a lot of people reflect on people who go to Petty and then go to college afterwards, reflect on the fact that there's so much more free time. So I don't know where hiking fits into that, but just in general in life, like what are you planning on doing with all the free time you get?
I think I'm gonna lock in grades wise, so I'll be working a lot. Um, I'm gonna continue working on the personal training thing. I don't know if we talked about this last podcast. I feel like did we not? Yeah, but like this summer I started getting ready to be a personal trainer, which is something you need a certification for. So basically, um, you get the study materials, you study, and then you pay to take a test. If you pass, you get certified, and then gyms will be able to hire you, or you could start your own thing and like start your own business, and just you're authorized to train people. Yeah. So I'll be studying for that throughout the school year as well.
Yeah, that's great, man. When you think about your motivations behind getting into PT or personal training, what do you think is the end goal with it? I know you're talking about that there's the potential for business around it as well, like starting your own thing. And before on hikes and everything, we talked about job market scarcity and how that's a skill in particular that might be valued even when a lot of other jobs are being replaced by AI and all that. So I guess you can talk more about that. Like what are some of the motivations that drive you to go pursue this? Because I also know you're really interested in fitness and nutrition in general. So
Yeah, I think I'm just keeping my options open because it's not the only path I'm considering going down. I was thinking being a doctor too. It's not something that's out of the equation. And if I'm gonna be a doctor, obviously, I don't think I'm gonna have time to do personal training on the side. But in the years leading up to that, during my college life, it'd be good to have PT as like a part-time job over the summer, during breaks, or even during the year, just to get some extra money, you know. And the AI thing is a real concern. Um, Even in the medical field, like lots of jobs are threatened by AI because not everything can be replaced, but it makes lots of jobs a lot easier, if that makes sense. So, um, I don't know. You could think about if you're like, I saw this thing about like uh, cancer diagnoses from like AI programs, and they're just so much more accurate than humans, but even and also faster. But we still need like doctors to confirm, just in case on the off chance that they are incorrect and stuff. But even though doctors aren't being completely taken out of the equation, it lessens their workload by so much. So hospitals that needed like 10 doctors to do that job before might not need that many anymore. They might just need like one or two. So like the total job amount is going down in a lot of fields. And it's good to have like a job like PT where it's mostly in person, like, you know, keeping an eye on a person and like physically being there, guiding them through exercises, movements, you know. It's not something you can really replace with just an AI program, not until you get like physical robots in the equation, you know. So it's a good thing to have just in case.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I want to dive more into maybe what jobs in particular you think are going to get hit the hardest, even in just the medical field. I wonder. I'm not well versed in medicine that much. I don't. I've never like gone deep into bio or chem or anything, or even read about like how this whole process works. So, um, what is the stages someone goes through when they're in that kind of position? Let's just look at cancer as the first example, right? How many people who are employed does he interact with in the whole process of doing that? Like, I'm sure there's with a diagnosis. The first time you're diagnosed is probably like when you see some symptoms for it, or is even during a general checkup. I'm not sure exactly the tests involved in this, right? So, I guess there's a stage of like going to the doctor. There's the nurses you interact with. There's the doctor you interact with, but then that's pretty much it, right? So you only interact with those people. How would this software that is involved in diagnosing, how does that work? Like, does it basically use the data from tests to predict your likelihood for getting, or like what? Break down the software for me.
It's like a scan, you know. People get scanned for cancer. So like I'm not a doctor yet, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think it's like radiologists.
Okay.
That's their job. They have to interpret these scans, and like typically it's a pretty high level task, so only doctors can really like perform that stuff. But AI is really good at recognizing patterns. It's something you're seeing in like if you're looking at AI art, they just they analyze all these patterns from previous artworks of actual humans. They're able to spit it out like pretty like consistently and make art that's, you know, pretty high level. It's like the same thing here. It's they're recognizing similar patterns between patients with cancer, and then every time like they get something right, like the people programming or like setting up the AI is going to say like, yeah, you're right, and then it'll get like, you know, reinforced. The AI will get smarter and it'll be able to detect these things on its own. Yeah.
I think when we talk about AI, it's really easy to paint the future as negative in a way, because in so many podcasts we talk about job market scarcity and what it's going to mean for people's lives and livelihoods and all the negative aspects of it. And some people even go down the route of AI taking over the world, and even in terms of taking over humans and all that. But I wonder, I just had this thought as you were speaking that AI has some strengths and some weaknesses, right? One of the main strengths is recognizing patterns and doing the mundane task at a much more efficient rate. I wonder if humans will respond to that by becoming even more creative. Because if you think about it, the only jobs that will remain are jobs that involve human creativity. Because we were talking about art, right? That AI is able to make art by recognizing patterns that have kind of already been created. And I'm sure AI can also create like original art, but it's all based on patterns that have already been established, right? But I think we think about art outside the realm of painting, but art as a concept of life, whether that be the art of wrestling or the art of um, any type of creativity, any type of creation, whether that be any kind of sport, any kind of entertainment type of resource, or just creating things that humans are able to do so well, which I think when I've read about sleep and all that, like there's all these interconnected webs in your brain, and the randomness kind of helps induce this human creativity. I wonder if all the mundane jobs are taken away, and even some of the high level jobs like scanning, radiologist jobs, scanning and diagnosing things we can't do that also rely on patterns. Maybe we'll be forced to change our occupations in a way where they're solely focused on maybe A, human creativity, but B, maybe even human emotion, because I think that's something that maybe it'll take longer for it to integrate within AI. And even when AI is advanced at predict making emotional behaviors through it based on predicting human behavior, I still think those two things are the things that will take the longest, and there's still something so unique about humans that we don't understand that we can replicate in robotics yet. But one example I'll take is just 2 episodes ago, I was telling you I did a podcast with someone I met at Crunch, and he works at RWJ Hospital, and he's a CEO of a nonprofit, and the nonprofit he does is they work with people who've been diagnosed with cancer, people that have been diagnosed with sickle cell disease, and all these random diseases that are really harsh, and these people typically have a lot of financial hardship as well, so they struggle a lot. And they don't provide any medical or financial support. They just maybe financial, but they only provide mainly emotional support. That his employees will go there every day and just sit with them and talk to them. And he even reflected on a story on the podcast where he just sat with someone and talked with them for an hour, and they found out they had similar interests about sports and just life in general, and they spent an hour talking. And I think that emotional support is something that humans have so intrinsically that maybe our jobs will deviate into that. So maybe there's a positive aspect of AI taking away the mundaneness. Like maybe we're able to really delve into something that makes humanity so special, like the creativity aspect. If you look back at history, the things we typically look back and wonder upon is like the Romans that were able to create these magnificent structures back 2,000 years ago. Because I think that human creativity is something that's so beautiful, and maybe it'll give us an opportunity to go even deeper into that.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely something about humanity that just can't be replaced by AI. I don't necessarily think it's creativity, but you're onto something when you say like emotionally, and something about having like a human presence that has value, and that's partly why I was interested in PT, and that's why I think PT is not something that's going to go away, because you're going to be out there like connecting as a human to another human being, forming a relationship and watching them grow and train in the gym. That's not something that an AI program or like even a robot could really replace, because there's an emotional connection there, and it's about not just it's not just about like tips in the gym. It's about like forming a bond and like encouragement. You know, that's also why like I don't think AI is gonna replace like relationships and stuff. I'm sure there's already probably like AI like girlfriends, AI boyfriends and stuff out there, but it's not really gonna replace real human connections, because that's something that we need. But I disagree on the creativity thing, just from like ChatGPT writing essays to like all these AI art generation things. It makes us realize that it makes me realize that as a human, all of my ideas come from my experiences. So like if I was to come up with an essay about whatever topic, or an art piece dedicated to whatever topic, what I'm gonna create is based on my own experiences, which is the exact same thing as AI making something out of all like the data that it's processed. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but like in a way we function the same way as AI. Everything that we create that's new is still based on previous things that we've observed. Like we can't really come up with a completely new idea. And it's the same thing for AI. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, because I think I had that same kind of realization at some point in the last year, but you come to a point where you start to feel like you're just a living AI, right? That you creativity at the end of the day is previous ideas kind of jumbling together to form a new idea. And if I ask you to just actually my mom told me this the other day, which actually got me thinking. If I tell you to just come up with a new idea and you just sat there and thought about trying to create a new idea, it's like, oh, this doesn't exist, but you can't imagine anything that isn't based on something that already exists. Even if I come up with an idea of a company, there'll be aspects of it that are connected to something that already exists. And sure, you can't explain the concept of an airplane to a tribe living 100,000 years ago, but it's not like one person had the idea of an airplane in their head one day. It's like a bunch of randomness of things that already exist in the world coming together to making the thing. I think the person who designed the helicopter, he got the idea of a helicopter from, I think, looking at a dragonfly or something, right? It's all inspired by some things that already exist, which I guess it goes to make us question like even the definition of creativity, and I guess the difference between AI and us. And we touched on the emotion part that we both agree on. I think there could be maybe some degree of creativity that's more advanced in humans, because I think that humans have created more remarkable things than AI has created yet. But I think yet is the biggest word, because maybe when it becomes more advanced and better at leveraging data that exists to even do more advanced things. But I think I do agree with that point. But I guess really the next big question is, what is creativity and what makes humans unique in that way when AI is able to do everything else?
Yeah, I think let's say like in 1,000 years, if we're still around and if AI is still around, they're gonna be much smarter than us, and I think AI is gonna be much more intelligent and creative than us. If you define creativity as like forming new ideas. Yeah. So the question of what really makes us different from AI, I don't think that comes from our ability to like outsmart them or create new things, because they're going to outdo us eventually if they haven't already. I think the difference is really just the emotional aspect, because we can't be sure that AI feels emotion even in 1,000 years. Like, have you ever thought like you don't actually know if anybody's like conscious?
Yeah.
You know, like you don't know if I'm conscious. You're only sure of your own consciousness, right? And you're definitely not sure if like AI is conscious. I don't think they're conscious, and I don't think they experience emotions. And I think that's the one thing that just sets us apart, and that's why we value, like going back to PT. That's why we value working out with an actual human being rather than a robot. Like even if the robot gives better advice, I might want to work out with another human being just for the emotional connection, for the motivation, whatever.
I wonder if it'll always be that way in terms of right now, if you ask anyone, they'll almost confidently say that, okay, humans definitely have emotions. Some people will go to the point where you were saying that they might think that no one else is conscious except for them, but I say that's like less than 1% of people, if not smaller. I think most people can agree that humans have consciousness on a broad scale. And I think people could, maybe a smaller percentage of people, but I'd say 60 to 80% of people say animals are conscious. Like if you read about like elephants and all these insane species that have very similar kind of human-like societies, and when I've been reading more about that, it's really fascinating. I believe that animals have consciousness as well. But even smaller percent of people, maybe even 20% now, maybe less, would say that plants have consciousness. And reading more about plant intelligence, and just because we're very anthropocentric as a species and we think in the way humans act, if you think in the way humans act, it's hard to say that plants have consciousness. But if you keep an open mind and broaden the range of consciousness to maybe a broader scale, I think we agree that plants have life, and to a degree, I could feel that they would have consciousness as well. But then most people would agree that a rock doesn't have consciousness, right? And I think if you ask anybody, I don't know a lot of people would say a robot has consciousness, right? And it's a very like clear distinction we have because we made that thing. But I think the more advanced it gets and the more we tailor it and the more it starts to create itself, irrespective of humans, I think right now if you ask anyone, no one, even I would not say robots have consciousness. But I think at some point they'll become so intelligent and human-like and emotion-like that it'll be hard to say, do they have consciousness or not? Like, we're gonna start doubting ourselves. Like, does that thing have consciousness? Like, if you have a conversation with ChatGPT about some problem, like, you start to wonder. Like, kind of feels like I'm talking to a real person here. Obviously, it's all intelligent based and not the emotion based. But I think that if technology continues to advance, it could get to that point where humans start to question, and a larger cohort of people will actually believe that. I think that AI is consciousness. And something that Sarah Walker was talking about that I really got me thinking is that we have a very limited definition of life based on what we see on this earth, right? We've observed the mechanics of life on this earth and even the laws of physics that work on this earth, and we um, expand it as a definition for the entire universe. But something that she talked about that I've even heard a lot of other people talk about is that life can be even more complicated than that. And some more advanced intelligent species that live somewhere in the universe could exist in a realm or dimension that humans just can't understand, right? And if they came and visited us, maybe they're already living amongst us, but in a different way that we can't understand, right? Like, maybe their intelligent technology or intelligent being has a way of entering our thoughts, and maybe some of the thoughts we have are just aliens living in our brain, right? Like, maybe there's something that's so universal amongst all humans, like some kind of very specific negative thought pattern that could maybe be an alien living in your brain. They could be your thoughts. They could be feelings. They can maybe exist in some fourth dimension that we can't really see, but kind of amongst us and observing us. But it's a little bit of a tangent, but it really makes you feel more open-minded in a way, because if some very, very intelligent species could exist in that way, it starts to raise the question of what is life? What does it mean to be conscious? Is there even a possibility that an AI could become conscious? And I think it's hard to answer that question.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. But I think the way I define the consciousness that we're talking about is like the ability to feel feelings. So if you get hit, like, you're gonna feel pain. I think that's consciousness. Like, to be able to suffer or to feel happy, that's consciousness. Like, what's the word for it? Like, like qualia, like being able to actually experience colors when you see them, versus, like, yes, a camera can recognize when something's red, but it's different from actually, like, seeing it in your own mind's eye, So yeah, it's pretty hard to define, and it's even harder to know what has consciousness, which is why I don't think that should be, like, really the focus. Like, all these physicists, if you watch those podcasts, I know I do at night, I turn on that those philosopher, like Lex Friedman type podcasts, and they're always debating about, like, what is consciousness and stuff. But in the end of the day, like, nobody knows. And since we don't know right now, the reason it matters is, like, legislation, or, like, how our society functions, because if we as a society all agreed that yes, animals have consciousness, then we should all stop eating meat. Like, the reason why knowing whether or not something is conscious is important is because we need to build laws around that to protect them if they are conscious. So if that's the case, right now, before we make robots that can, like, be conscious, or, like, at least mimic consciousness, we should start to, like, come up with some legislation, kind of, like, I don't want our society to go to the point where there's gonna be, like, debates about whether or not robots should vote or not, because honestly, like, I'm pretty selfish. I don't want there to be a day where there's no more humans. I want us to, like, continue existing and stuff. And, like, even if robots can be conscious, I still wouldn't want them to, gain rights. I don't know if that's bad. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but, like all animals are selfish. We're selfish. I'm pretty selfish. I don't want that to happen, And we should start now, and we should start legislating that to make sure that we don't consider robots as conscious. That way, there will never be a day where they can, gain rights and eventually the ability to like overthrow us.
That's a little bit scary, but I could imagine 100 years from now the Instagram post, if Instagram's still around, of robot rights and these protests about robot rights. It'll be an interesting place. Maybe the podcast will still be around to reflect on that, and we'll look back at August of 2024 when we predicted it. But yeah, I think when you talk about legislation, it makes sense because I guess that's the only reason these debates are useful. Otherwise, it's kind of a waste of time. And I think now that I understand that, like before I would kind of just think it's for fun, but now I know there's another element to it that's the main benefit of debating for it or against it, right? That how do we as a society approach that, right? And I think there needs to be some order, otherwise the society kind of falls apart and it gets confusing. But I think the thing that makes this unique is that we can philosophize about it all day long, but will we ever reach an answer? And I wonder if we'll ever... This is a certain category or topic area that is it even possible to reach an answer, right? If we look within the closed realm of science, you can use a scientific method to hypothesize about things and test things and experiment with things and prove things. Something with the nature of consciousness is too difficult, I think, to enter that scientific debate where you can't prove it through rigorous testing. It's more a philosophical debate where you can spend hours and hours writing hundreds of pages of books that as humans have been doing since the beginning of time, reflecting on this is what consciousness, no, but this is what consciousness is, and we're just debating until one argument sounds the best or feels the best. And it's not really an effective way of approaching it. So maybe these debates will go on forever until one argument just sounds powerful enough for everyone to agree to it, and then that's how society will function. So I do think there is a benefit to these kind of discussions about consciousness if it's impossible to even get to a clear proven consensus. Or
I think the difference between consciousness and other things lies in the fact that like nobody else can prove it for you. So like let me explain. Like say one day some like neuroscientist or philosopher or something comes up with an idea about what consciousness is and like who has consciousness. Maybe all humans have consciousness or something. And they say they've figured it out, right? But the thing is, like, you know, you could just like suddenly wake up and you realize it's all a dream. You know? Like in another dimension or something. Because you don't really know you can't really test it, or you can't really believe other people's tests of consciousness. So for example, like if somebody said they like transplanted their consciousness into like another person or something, you still wouldn't know if they are conscious or that they were conscious. You know what I'm saying? Like you only know that you're conscious. So if you want to like scientifically test it, you got to test it on yourself. And if somebody else says they've like figured it all out, you don't know if they've actually figured it all out. Like what if they're just saying that they're not actually conscious? You know, they're just like a zombie. You know.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that we don't even have a clear definition of consciousness.
Yeah.
There's probably some Google definition of it, but we all have a different way of understanding it, right? Like the way you described it was having feelings, being able to feel being hit, or not even the physical aspect of it, maybe the emotional aspect of it, or sadness and happiness. Like that might be your way of interpreting consciousness. But to maybe another person, they might disagree with the definition because they'll argue that, well, emotions were just a part of evolution to protect us and help us survive and reproduce, right? That you only feel fear because people who felt fear had a greater chance of survival and didn't just like run into the pack of wolves for no reason. And people that felt, people who might have been extremely fearless were the ones who jumped off mountains. And basically emotions are a way of evolution, and that everything you feel is because of evolution. Well, if that's the case, then what is consciousness? Someone else might say, like, they might have an argument related to be able to think thoughts and make decisions for yourself and be able to be aware of your surroundings instead of just existing in it. But then it's an argument of like, do other animals have that? Like it's never ending as you described it, and you really have to feel it for yourself and understand it. Like this is the way I look at it, right? And you're talking about some scientists can't wake up one day and say I've proven it based on this theorem and based on this axiom and this is consciousness, because I think in some regards, like, let's look at nutrition, right? You can prove that if you do 10 bicep curls a day and eat 100 grams of protein, that statistically your biceps will grow bigger. And you could prove that through scientific testing that we had a
Yeah.
control group and a test group. But this is a debate about definitions.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to go into the science part of it as well, because I also have mixed opinions on the whole science concept of science as a general, because I do think that a lot of science as we know it may not actually be true, and I think that when you really, I think when a study is concluded, we make conclusions based off a study, and then we use that conclusion to create other studies or other conclusions.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much of the pathway from experiment to result that we don't really dive into and inspect more clearly. Like, there's been so many experiments done on these, like, food sweeteners, right? And it's been proven that some of these sweeteners are not that bad for you, right? Now, my dad and I were reading an article about it today. But if you go in, like, the fine details of the scientific article, they only tested the effect of it from having such a small amount of it over a period of a week or a month, versus, okay, what's the effect of it 10 years down the line? No study exists for that. But we have one study that shows it's not bad for you, and they'll make a general conclusion based off a small study, and then use it to make other conclusion, which I think a lot of the terms we think of as accepted science may be backed up by faulty either logic or faulty experiments that go on to us having these grand conjectures about science in general that if you really dig down to the foundations behind it, that also itself might not be true, which I guess it raises the question of even beyond consciousness, like, how do we know what the truth is in general?
Yeah, I agree. There's like definitely issues, I guess, in the scientific community, but I don't think you could say like the scientific method is faulty. You know, if you test things correctly and you control for everything and you don't have any, like bias, whatever, then you will get truthful, accurate results that you can like really rely on. Like what you're talking about is more there's people with their own interests interpreting science that doesn't have extremely, unbiased findings and then using it for their own advantage. Like think of like the sugar industry, like spreading lots of stuff, that now we realize is untrue based on like their own funded studies and stuff. I think that's messed up, but I don't think that's like a problem with the scientific method. It's about like the people that are, like utilizing their power and all that. Yeah.
So I guess it's less about the method itself and more about the way the method is executed, I guess, is the real point. Because I'm not against science. I'm not some big science hater, because I find science pretty fascinating, and I think that even if it's not perfect, it helps us make conclusions that are intelligent in a way, right? So it's still useful in a way. But I do think that even if we go beyond the real malicious companies like in the food industry, even if we extend to science as a whole, even with people with good intents, is it ever possible to control for every factor? Is it possible to have an experiment with completely zero bias? I think that's where it starts to get difficult. And I'm not against science, because I think that even if you minimize it, you could still make pretty useful conclusions. But I don't think science does admit that as well, that you can't really prove a hypothesis is true. You can just kind of prove what a lot of things is wrong and make conclusions based on that. But I think it's difficult to say anything, any statement is literally, this is 100% true. Because then if you dig deeper, there's always nuances. Even if it's not with people with nefarious intents, there's always a question like, did you control for every factor and everything? I think that's where science gets kind of complicated. I don't really know how we're supposed to navigate that in terms of people who really want to access truthful information and figure out, like, is this something I can trust, like, 100%?
I think that just comes down to, like, if you're interested in a topic and it's important to you, you should really dig into it and, like, interpret it yourself. Like, to your question of can a study be completely unbiased, I say, like, probably not. Like, there's just too many factors in this world for that to be true. But once you have enough evidence of something, you can still, like, come to conclusions. So I think the best example of that is, like, smoking and lung cancer. It's something we talked about in, like, stats and other classes, maybe anatomy, maybe, like, I don't know, just other stuff I've seen online, but like we actually don't have like a experimental study, like cause and effect study on humans for smoking and lung cancer. And the reason for that is like it's unethical to like give a group of people like cigarettes to smoke and then see if they get lung cancer later on. It's unethical. So what we do instead is like observational studies. So that's not really like cause and effect, it's just correlation. But we have so many of these observational studies that show there is a correlation between smoking and lung cancer that we say, you know, smoking causes lung cancer. Even though you technically can't really say that because there aren't any experiments done. You get what I'm saying? Like that's an example of, you know, not everything's perfect, but you can still come to your own conclusion. So it just really comes down to, you gotta dig into it yourself, you know, and see if there's enough evidence.
So I guess as a society, we have to accept the fact that there's always a small chance that everything around us is not true, but there's enough we can do to control for certain factors to make certain conclusions based on the acknowledgement that not there's a chance that we're not controlling for everything, and there's some assumptions involved, but we can get pretty close to the truth, I guess, is a basic conclusion. And we can also accept the fact that with time, with more research, things that we believe to be true can be false, and things that we believe to be false can be true. And I guess that's just the nature of humanity and science in general, right? That it gives us enough to work with, like today, right? That we have enough science to back up certain things related to medicine, related to cancer diagnosis, that it gives us enough tools to be able to operate in today's society while acknowledging the fact that obviously not everything we know is fundamentally true.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that one.
Going back to our discussion with AI, this is an idea I got earlier today, but didn't bring up because we got wrapped up in discussions about consciousness. I was doing this course, getting ready for some stuff I'm about to be studying in Michigan, and I was watching this lecture video from 2012, 2013, and I think the internet was still there, but there was definitely no AI, definitely no quick answers to solutions and everything like that. And I think if we look at our time in high school, first 2 years AI wasn't a big thing. Like we weren't really, the ChatGPT wasn't even out yet. Internet was there, and then the next 2 years, junior year, senior year, we had AI as a tool, right? And I know a lot of people have already talked about what that has to do with education. I want to first say that I'm not worried about education as a whole, but I do think that we are very quick to jump to finding answers when we can't figure it out. And I see that a lot in like when we took classes like MPS, old MPS system classes like MPS 2H, PCH, all those classes that I took at Petty. Because obviously you'll try to do the problems yourself, but then you'll kind of search it up when you can't figure it out, and you'll find a way through. And then with ChatGPT it becomes a lot easier to just like give up easily. Yeah. But I never really I never really was overthinking it. But I guess when I was watching that lecture, even though they probably saw the internet in that video, and even though a lot of people probably were searching up answers, I could feel like in nature, there's energy in the kids that there's no pressure to be the one who's right. And that, like, I felt that pressure a lot, that since you want to be the one that's right, like, you'll just try to search it up, you try to figure out what the answer is. But when there's a world without the AI, where there's a world without the internet, which obviously was still there in the video, but I'm just thinking back to that world. Yeah. There's still that pressure to get the right answer, but then you really don't have an answer. You don't have a way to get there except for doing it yourself. And now, even I look at myself and people around me, like, we're so quick to jump to Google and ChatGPT. We just need an answer. Like, just look at the answer real quick, and then we'll just assume we're learning. But I do miss that energy of like being in a group with people and just not jumping to the answer immediately, because there's literally no way for you to do it. Like, you kind of have to work through the problem yourself. And I do think that I don't know if we'll ever be able to go back to a society where that's actually a real thing, where we're not just jumping to answers, we're actually working through it. And obviously you can do it if you're disciplined about, like, okay, let me just like spend an hour with this. But if you're sitting in class, your computer out, and someone's asking a question, like, you want to be the first one to get it. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree, but at the same time, I feel like the reason we just want to jump to conclusions and answers now is because AI makes all those problems kind of like trivial, you know? Like if AI can do it now, if even like freshman year we had like Symbol Lab and stuff.
I remember that.
But yeah, like if AI can just do it that much faster than us, then like why don't we let it do it for us? You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of goes back to like, you ever ask your parents like, why am I learning this stuff? Like it's not important. I feel like a lot of stuff is about to become unimportant, and like, you know, it's good to know some basic math and just so that you know what's going on. But at the same time, for like really complicated stuff that we're doing just as practice problems, like I feel like it is kind of unnecessary with AI at this point. Like if you have a job, you're not going to be doing that stuff yourself anymore if it involves math or whatever. As long as you understand the concept, you're probably just going to use AI to do it for you, and it looks about right. Then that's what you do, right? So even though it's made these things kind of trivial, it brings like new opportunities to work on new things, and we can still like work hard and fail and trial and error on these new problems that arise with AI. Yeah.
And I think with the way you're describing it, the realm of things that we deem trivial now might be in like a bucket this big, but then maybe 20 years from now it's like this much stuff is trivial because AI becomes so advanced that it could do all this for us. And I do agree that to it it's a good thing because then we could focus on other things, right? There's still an opportunity for creativity, an opportunity for trial and error. But I do think that if we do start to say that it's trivial because AI can do it, so we kind of drop most of it, we will definitely as a society lose the foundational knowledge to understand why anything exists, right? I think it's these kind of things we think about, it's in our books and everything, but they can really easily die away in a couple of generations, right? The foundational understanding of it. And I mean, if AI can write code, and if AI can write the code that writes AI, so we leave it to the AI to make the AI, and then humans are out of the picture in terms of making it even involved with the AI. Like AI is making itself at this point because it's written the code that makes the AI. At that point, 3-4 generations down the line, if 3-4 generations of people not writing code because they've deemed it trivial, now you have a whole generation of people that don't know how to write AI, and it's almost like we've created two different things.
Yeah.
So, I wonder, first of all, at a broad level, do you think that will ever be true? Losing that foundational knowledge, and second, is that such a bad thing to not have that foundational knowledge anymore?
I mean, I feel like it's gonna happen. It's already happening. Like we're probably the first generation where that's gonna happen to us. Yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It could be bad for some people, like maybe you or me, who have like studied a lot at school, and now we're realizing like maybe the next generation can just do the things that we're doing without ever having to like study this hard at all. So it could be bad for some people, but as a society, I think if AI is so much smarter than us, then yeah, we're gonna advance so much faster if they're doing it. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. The only problem that comes up is like what we've talked about before, which is like humans don't have anything to do anymore. It could be bad if all of us don't have jobs and we can't make a living. Like I don't know what's gonna happen then if nobody has work. Like, are they still gonna keep us around and give us food and stuff, or
I guess that's where we go back to the question of what is uniquely human. And I guess we could try to brainstorm, like, what are the jobs that you think will take the longest time for AI to take over, right? I think PT's on that list because it has the emotional connection, right? Like, you go to the gym. I think a large part about gym life, obviously not for everyone, people just like working out by themselves, but a lot of people who talk about the gym also talk about the gym community, right? Being around people. Even if there's a robot that's exactly like a human, there's still something, I think, between humans that you can't replicate. So yes, PT, there's the emotional aspect of it, right? My friend who's a CEO of the nonprofit, there's the emotional aspect of it, right? So what other jobs do you think, can you reflect on right now, that you think would be the hardest for AI to take away, and do you think that will always stay like intrinsically human?
Just like everything that needs a human connection will probably stay. So, and then higher skill jobs will probably decrease. So if you're talking about like doctors or the medical field. I'm saying probably less surgeons because there's going to be robots doing that versus maybe more nurses, maybe more like caretakers and stuff like that for like old patients or like end of life patients or like babies, stuff like that. Stuff where you really need an emotional connection. Honestly, like sex work is probably never going away. It's one of the earliest jobs in human history and probably going to be one of the last because people are looking for that connection in another human, not a robot. Although I'm sure there's going to be freaky robots too.
Well, if we become so advanced in a society where you don't need sexual attraction to make babies anymore, maybe we also de-evolve sexual attraction. I don't know. It's a thought. That'll take a while, maybe billions of years. So I don't think we have to worry about that. There was an idea I had based on something you said. It's left my mind. 1 second. Yeah. So I think the jobs that are the most dangerous in terms of the most likely for AI to take over. Based on what you were describing with surgery, I had these two ideas I had. I think there's these two traits that jobs that are the most risky right now have. And one of them is a job that has a high accident rate. And second is a job that has a high accident rate, but also the consequences of the accident are more severe.
Yeah.
Right? That's why surgery is a good one you bring up because the robot's accuracy for surgery will be better than the humans, definitely. I think definitely surgery in general is a pretty safe thing now because most of the surgeons are pretty well advanced, but every now and then the mistake happens, right?
Yeah.
My doctor was telling me that you could do LASIK, but there's always a chance that you get glare for life and blurry vision for life. There's always a chance. Yeah. And obviously there's a chance with the robot as well, but it's drastically lower with the systems that we're going to create. So surgery is a good example of the thing because there's a high accident rate, but also the consequence of that accident is also much larger, right? You're talking like real shit. So even if there are jobs that humans can automate, if there's not a high accident rate and there's not a huge consequence of the accident rate, I still think humans will still do those jobs, even though a robot could do it. Obviously, the main problem is that some companies will have more incentive to hire robots than humans for pay. But if it's something humans like doing, like I know a lot of humans that just enjoy working, so they'll do those jobs. As long as there's not a huge accident rate or anything, they'll still be doing those jobs, right? Yeah. And there's all these other jobs that just come to mind, like leadership jobs. Sure, you can automate leadership, but again, there's a human aspect of it, right? So sure, the mundane work, the Excel sheets are run by the AI, but is there still a human over there who's a leader who, since there's an emotional aspect of it and there's skills in leadership, will that be a job that stays, as an example? What do you think about that?
I think first of all we have to say that like some jobs aren't gonna like disappear, but the number of people working in those jobs will decrease drastically. So there's a lot of topics I want to talk about. The first one is like what I just said, like for surgeons, for example, robots can probably do surgeries much more accurately and probably quickly and effectively than humans one day, but I think people will still want like a living human conscious being overseeing everything, Really? So yeah, for like I don't know, like legal purposes or like just like responsibility, like what if the robot does end up messing up, like who gets blamed? You need somebody to oversee it. So in this case, I think like maybe in a hospital with like 100 surgeons, maybe you only need like a couple, once again, to just oversee the surgeries, just to take responsibility and so that the people undergoing surgery feel a bit more comforted that there's also like a human component in there. But yeah, that's an example of a job that's gonna decrease a lot, but it won't completely disappear. Like you still need to train people to know how to do surgery so that they can oversee it, but the number of surgeons is gonna decrease.
Yeah, I know you said you had a lot of ideas, but real quick on the surgery piece. I could see your point now because I guess human connection, right? People like the human connection piece of it. I would say that if I see that there's a human surgeon who has a 5% accident rate and there's a robot surgeon that's never made a mistake, I'm probably gonna go with the robot, right? If there's literally like a 0.0001% accident rate, like okay, sure, human connection and all that, but I don't want to die, so I'll go with the robot. I could see a lot of people going that way, but I do agree that there's a cohort of people that agree with you, at least for now, the time being.
Yeah.
In terms of who's there to blame, I still think there's a company you're purchasing the service from, right? Even though there's not a physical doctor there, paying money to this AI company, and obviously probably has people who own the company or the people who are in charge of the company. There's still money involved, there's still transaction involved, so there's still someone you can blame. But I can agree with the other point that sure, some people opt for accuracy, but some people just really would feel uncomfortable if there's not a human nearby. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I feel like that was another thing with like the self-driving cars and stuff. Like, who gets blamed if there's an accident? And yeah, like we always figured out a way. But back to what you were saying about the like low risk jobs, you know, that humans can just keep on doing and stuff. Like, at the end of the day, there isn't enough jobs for everybody if that's all that's left. You know, it's still gonna be like a big problem if all these high level jobs disappear. And I think it's gonna be an especially big problem for people in our generation who are getting educated and then they end up realizing like they wasted so much money because like they can't find a job or people are taking their jobs. Like it's like a big thing that's going on or is like going to happen is like back to the medical field again, like doctors versus like lower level practitioners like nurses, whatever. There's more and more stuff that nurses are being like allowed to do and like open up their own. There's some states that let nurses open up their own places to like practice on people and whatever, and they have to go through less education than doctors to get that job. So like all these high level positions are disappearing. So I feel like that's going to happen to many fields, and it'll get to the point that like there's some people who have never even received like a college education or anything doing jobs that people have to go through many like 8 or more years of schooling to get the same position. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if we use art as an example, like we're currently at the point in time where AI is making better art than at least like high schoolers, right? Like I don't think there's, including me, there's nobody in my class that can draw or paint better than AI in like, I don't know, AP Studio or like something like that. Like AI surpassed us. So if you're like a little kindergartner and you can type, you can go to ChatGPT or not ChatGPT, whatever like AI art generating thing, tell them to draw a picture for you and it'll be better than what I can draw. Even though I spend like a lot of time drawing and painting. It's the same for all jobs. Like there's going to be like low level people, as long as they have the basic skills to use AI, they're going to be able to do like more complex jobs. And it's going to be bad for people like us who are spending all this time to get educated.
2 things. Number 1, I want to dig deeper into your argument about art, because I don't think people value art just for how good it is, if you know what I mean. It's not like I'll look at that painting over there that's behind you, a beautiful painting, and this one right over here, and I'll look at both of them and I'll say that this one has colored better, it's more sharper, it's more realistic, so that one's ultimately the better art, right? I bought this at a store and my sister painted that. So in the back of my mind, even though one piece of art is better than the other piece of art, there's something that is different when you admire it and you know that a human created it, right? If we look at I went to Rome and I saw the St. Peter's Basilica. If you've never seen it, search up pictures. It's huge, right? We have things in the West that are just as big and beautiful, but we still look at that one and say that, wow, that's beautiful, because we're shocked that someone 2,000 years ago could have made that with the resources they had. Now that we have the resources, if someone makes it, it's not a big deal, right? If AI made that art, like, it's not a big deal. But we look at a painting that someone made with their bare hands, and we're valued that much more, because I think art at the end of the day is a form of expression. And I think some of the beauty behind the art is like, how the hell did someone even create that? So I do disagree that ChatGPT will take the meaning behind art away, because I do think that sure it can make a better painting than a high schooler, but we're more mesmerized by painting when we're like, oh, that 12-year-old made that painting, and it kind of changes our whole the background, like the story behind the painting often tells us more about the painting than the painting itself.
I agree but only for the topic of art, because that's one of those fields that is very like sentimental, and like emotion's a big part of it. Yeah, so I completely agree with that. Like, I'm gonna value something that my friend made for me way more than like something more technically skilled made by AI. Yes, but there's other fields that this applies to. Like, I don't know, like investment and stuff like that. If you have like a AI look at everything and invest your money for you, it'll probably make a lot more money than maybe you, or even like some guru online trying to sell you like their investment technique book or like course or something. Like, those guys are gonna be out of a job because AI can do it. Or I don't know, like, name any field. There's something that can be like automized by AI at this point in time, and then in the future, like almost anything. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I'm not expanding this to all field areas, because I do agree that there's definitely a concern, but I think one thing that I'm really curious about that we can only speculate about is what will the monetary distribution be in the future, which I think we talked about before in our second podcast, where we talked about the future of no need to work, and we can maybe get back into that if you want to, but I'm just curious about what the monetary distribution is going to be in terms of, I think a lot of the world is dictated by the flow of money, right? Even though money is not really a real thing, it's an idea in our head. At the end of the day, societies are kind of built on money, right? Whether that be gold or some societies in the past have literally given seashells to each other as a form of currency. Like, at the end of the day, it's a concept, but it's a concept that works to make the society function as a whole. It's really weird, really interesting concept about money, but the flow of money, the way the money is distributed amongst society controls pretty much every aspect of each person's life, right? And in a capitalistic society like the one we live in today, well, right now I think capitalism is really helping people to live better lives, because on average people in the West live pretty, even people that don't have much money can still get resources that are most people in the past couldn't have enjoyed, right? I think the West in general is a really nice, luxurious place to live. But I do think that there's a chance that the distribution of money gets funky in the future in a way that I don't even know how it'd be, but just an idea is, if the world does become a monopoly where AI, maybe there's like 2 or 3 companies that run the entire scheme. The 2 or 3 companies develop all the AI that automates everything, right? And they become this monopoly where some people try to do AI startups, but there's already like, if Google already exists, that I can try to make my own web browser. Everyone's using Google, right? Google has a monopoly. There could be 2 or 3 AI companies that become the monopoly. And since AI is now expanding from technology to pretty much any field you can name, from the medical field to the finance field, like we've touched on pretty much everything in this episode, right?
Yeah.
So if it can expand to all of it and it becomes a monopoly, all of a sudden it's not the monopoly of one sphere anymore, right? Like, Google is a monopoly, but only within the realm of the internet, right? If you think about like the number in the food industry, there's 2 or 3 main companies that manage, like I think there's only like a few major fast food companies that manage actually all the other fast food companies, right? So there's only a few big players that have the monopoly of the fast food industry, right? But now AI is not just a monopoly of a certain sphere. It's not a monopoly of the entire world, meaning that all the income money is going to be circulated there. But it's the weirdest thing, because all the companies that are the monopolies employ a lot of people.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden the monopoly that exists is going to employ no one, and they're going to be in charge of the world.
Yeah.
What does the distribution of money look like then? Which to me is a very difficult idea to grasp, because there's a chance it can go back to a society where the kings have all the billions of dollars and the peasants on the street have nothing. So how do you think that monopoly of monetary distribution is going to play out?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting topic. Like, I'm not like an economist or anything, so I can't tell you. But from everything we've just said, I think it's gonna be like, the super rich are gonna get even richer, and then everybody else is gonna get evened out. Like the playing field is gonna be evened out because, like, I think petty students are probably typically more affluent than your typical, like, American. But if all of this education at the end of the day lands you a job that's on the same level as everybody else, then, like, now everybody's the same. Everybody, like, below the super rich is probably gonna be, like, living pretty similar lives. Like, I don't know if that's gonna be a good thing or a bad thing. I feel like we might just be at the mercy of these super rich company owners and stuff. Yeah, which is kind of unfortunate. But at the same time, like, this is also a time of, like, rapid innovation. Like, if you're trying to get super rich right now, like, there's still time for you to join that group. Like, if you're a business, like, creator, if you're a businessman and you do something, you make something successful, like, you could rise to the top right now because there's so many things that are changing in this world. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, man, it's confusing, but I do think that it won't be like a primitive society where it'll be similar, right? Because sure, in terms of monetary distribution, it could be similar to the king has everything, the peasants are all evened out, right? They all have equal playing field, but that doesn't mean we're gonna be living on the streets because at the same time, innovation and technology will be such a high because of AI that I do think even if we have evened out in money, we'll still have access to luxury.
Yeah.
In a way, not obviously some like 5-star hotel, but you'll have a place to stay.
Yeah.
Right, and all that because of AI's innovation. So I think the quality of life will be the same, but how will humans react to all being the same? That is another question because if you look at is anthropology the right word? I think it's anthropology is the study of human, right?
I think so.
Whatever, you study humans. There's a deer over there. What is 3 deers? Check that out. 3 deers over there.
Oh shit.
You see it from there?
No.
Yeah, if you study humans, human nature is like we don't like to be the same. We have that competitive spirit in us, and right now we can fuel that into capitalism, which is what most people do, or they'll play other games, or they'll find other ways to fuel that spirit at the gym or in sports or whatever. Like they find ways to fuel that energy, but if you're all equal, that's gonna be so hard for humans to do. Even if it's luxury lifestyle, the fact that everyone's the same, like how would that mean going back to primitive fighting, or like how would humans respond to that is another question I got.
Like, I have no clue. Like, it kind of depends on like what society is gonna be like for your average person, like not the super rich people. Like maybe it could be, the wealth trickles down. Maybe we all live forever, and we could do whatever. Like maybe everybody's infinite resources. Like you don't know. Like what if AI is super smart and it somehow lets us colonize like the entire universe or something? Everybody can have their own like little planet if they wanted to. Like you don't know. You don't really know what's gonna happen. But the other side is like, all those people saying like we're gonna live in like a pod and like eat bugs all day because that's like the most efficient energy source for protein or whatever, and like you don't really know what's gonna happen. Yeah, it really depends. I think humans will always need something to do. So if they're stuck in pods all day, they're gonna probably take out their anger, and like there's gonna be, I don't know, just lots of discontent in society. But if everybody has their own little planet, then they'd probably occupy their time doing like things that they want to do, like exploring or like whatever.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you do have the luxury to be able to do that, then we'll be fine. But maybe we'll be so sedated by technology and addictions and companies that we won't have the testosterone or ability to do that anymore. But yeah. I gotta take a piss. We'll be right back. All right, we back. It's been about an hour, so we gotta get to the gym. Gotta hit nasty chest day at crunch. So we're gonna close it out. I know we were talking about this in the car, but it's episode 50, so it's a good time for reflection on the podcast. And I can talk obviously on my own about what I believe has been the greatest thing about the podcast, where I see it going. But I thought we'd let the Hall of Fame Ryan Liu, who's been on 5 times in 50 episodes, share his opinions on the podcast so far, and maybe even advice, tips, like whatever you got, bro. Let's close it out with that.
Yeah, I think it's crazy impressive that you've been so consistent in making it to 50 episodes. I know you're not racking in like a ton of views to every video, and I think most people would have given up by now. So it really shows your discipline, and I do think it will pay off in the long run. As for advice, I'd say, meet new people at Michigan. Find some more specialized guests, guys that are smarter or funnier than me and all the other guys are bringing on. Yeah, and just keep going. Yeah.
Really appreciate that. Means a lot. But here we are, episode 50. Probably won't see you again until December. So who knows what episode you're going to be on by then. But until then, pleasure doing this with you, and good luck at Rutgers. Hopefully we'll stay in touch, and let's go get after that chest day.
Yeah, let's go bench.
Alright, peace, bro. Thank you for tuning in to my episode. If you enjoyed that episode, I guarantee that you'll love this episode right here. The best way to support the channel is by hitting the subscribe button. It'll help me to upgrade the channel, get better guests, better production, and overall more episodes for you. And by hitting the subscribe button, you'll ensure that you'll never miss a new release. While you're at it, hit the like button, leave a comment, and share the link with your best friend. Thank you once again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.